Every morning, at precisely 6:12 a.m., Shadow, the retired K9, would walk to the same spot in the living room. He didn't look out the window. He didn't glance toward the door. His focus was always on the plain, unremarkable wall just to the left of the bookshelf. His body would be tense, ears forward, and his eyes, they never wavered. His gaze was fixed, like he was waiting for something. Or perhaps waiting for someone. Evelyn Blake, his handler and a retired detective, couldn't make sense of it. She had seen it all, the chaos of crime scenes, the unsolved cases, and the trauma that followed her every step. But Shadow's behavior, this quiet, almost ritualistic staring, unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. She had rescued Shadow 6 months ago after his previous handler disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The department retired him without any fanfare, and there was little information about why. His file was thin, almost too thin, heavily redacted in no sections that should have been clear, but when Evelyn met him, she felt a connection. She saw the weight behind his eyes, a seriousness that suggested Shadow wasn't just done yet. Every day, Evelyn would sip her coffee, her eyes following Shadow as he stood in the same spot. No barking, no scratching, just silence. But sometimes, on the worst days, Shadow would let out a low, steady growl. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't an attack. It felt like something deeper, something in the dog's past, trying to break free. A memory, perhaps. At first, Evelyn dismissed it as trauma, something from Shadow's countless missions. He had seen the worst of humanity after all. Maybe the corner triggered a scent, a sound, or even a place he had once been. But as the days passed, Evelyn couldn't ignore that it felt like more. Shadow wasn't just haunted by the past. It was like he was trying to tell her something. Shadow's story was one of mystery long before he arrived at Evelyn's door. He had been adopted from a closed unit's retirement program, a place where retired K9s were sent after their service ended. But unlike most retired dogs, Shadow came with little more than a name and a set of heavily redacted documents. His previous handler had disappeared without explanation, and the department had quietly retired him, never discussing the circumstances. Evelyn had first noticed how thin his case file was. It was almost like someone didn't want her to know too much about his past. Redacted sections filled the pages, leaving a cold, unanswered void. No details about his service, no explanations for why his handler was missing. It was as if he had been erased, wiped clean from the records, but what caught Evelyn's eye most was the golden mark on his paw. It wasn't just a natural fur pattern, or some common injury. The streak was distinctive, like something he had earned. It was unusual, almost unnatural. Evelyn couldn't help but feel there was something more to this mark, something that held significance. She began reviewing his file more carefully, hoping to uncover any detail that might explain his behavior. Yet every time she came across another redacted line or an unexplained gap, the feeling of unease only deepened. It wasn't long before Evelyn's partner, Detective Mason Roy, dropped by to check on her. When he saw Shadow pacing in the living room, eyes fixed on the same wall as usual, he chuckled. "Ghosts in the walls?" He joked, trying to lighten the tension. "You know how it goes. They get these weird habits, right?" But Evelyn didn't laugh. She couldn't. There was something in Shadow's behavior that felt wrong. It wasn't just a dog stuck in the past. It was like he was waiting for something. Something only he could sense. The situation grew stranger by the day. Shadow's behavior wasn't confined to just mornings anymore. At night, the pacing would start again. His claws scraped against the floor as he circled the living room. He would scratch at the wall, his whimpers growing louder. There was no other source of noise, just the constant rhythm of Shadow's restless movements, always fixated on that single silent spot. Evelyn felt a chill run through her. The growls had been bad enough, but now this? Whimpering, scratching. The dog was clearly in distress, and it was always at the same wall. Was it the past haunting him? Or was there something else hiding there? Something he was desperate to uncover? Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that Shadow was trying to communicate, trying to tell her, something that no one else would believe. One evening, after an especially intense episode of barking and persistent growling from Shadow, Evelyn could no longer ignore the nagging feeling that there was something more to this mystery. Shadow was clearly distressed, his focus on the wall more intense than ever before. She had seen the way his body tensed, his growls growing deeper, as if trying to push past the silence. Evelyn stood up and crossed the room. The ticking clock seemed louder than usual in the stillness, but she was determined. This had gone on long enough. She carefully moved the furniture away from the wall, revealing the narrow space where Shadow had spent hours fixating. The wall was plain, unremarkable, nothing that would suggest any kind of hidden secret. But Evelyn's instincts told her something was off. She tapped the wall, her fingers tracing the solid surface. It didn't feel right. There was a hollow sound when she knocked. Her pulse quickened. Without hesitation, she grabbed a hammer and carefully began to chip away at the drywall. The material cracked easily under her efforts. Evelyn's heart raced. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but when the wall finally gave way, revealing an old, sealed-off cubby, the truth hit her like a punch to the gut. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she carefully peered into the cubby. It wasn't large, but it was enough to hold something significant. Inside, hidden from view for who knew how many years, were remnants of something lost, something forgotten. First, she noticed a child's crayon drawings, the colors faded but still visible. They looked simple, innocent, a child's attempt to capture the world in blocky shapes. But the drawings were unsettling in their simplicity. Beside the drawings, a tiny shoe lay crumpled in the corner, its fabric rotted with age. Evelyn's stomach turned. She carefully lifted it, examining the remnants of what had once been a child's belonging. But the most chilling discovery came next. A half-decayed blanket, worn and fragile, its edges fraying. As Evelyn lifted it, a name stitched into the fabric was revealed. Noah. A shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. Noah. Shadow's obsession with the wall, his growls, his relentless pacing, it all came crashing together. She was looking at the remnants of something long buried, something that had been hidden for decades. And Shadow had been there too, somehow connected to this mystery. Evelyn didn't waste any more time. She called in the authorities, reporting her discovery immediately. Investigators arrived soon after, and the story took an unexpected turn. The evidence was undeniable. The drawings, the shoe, the blanket, they matched the description of a missing child named Noah who had vanished 12 years ago. The case had been closed due to lack of evidence, but this discovery was enough to reopen it. As the investigators pieced together the new information, they made a chilling realization. Shadow had been a part of that search. Somehow, the retired K9 had been involved in the search for a missing child, a case long buried and forgotten. But no one had known this. No one had understood the significance of Shadow's behavior, of his attention to that wall. And now, after all these years, the dog had led them to a secret that had remained hidden for over a decade. Evelyn and Detective Mason Roy didn't waste a moment after their discovery. The mystery that had hung in the air like a dense fog for days now felt real, tangible, and urgent. They weren't dealing with a simple case of a dog's odd behavior anymore. They were knee-deep in a puzzle that had been buried for over a decade. They started reviewing the files from the cold case of Noah, the missing boy, with new eyes that knew the dog, Shadow, had been involved in ways they couldn't yet fully comprehend. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. Evelyn's eyes widened as they uncovered one piece of information after another. Shadow had been originally deployed in this very neighborhood, the very place where she now lived. The area was notorious for its quiet, suburban charm, but it had once been the site of panic and confusion. Noah had disappeared without a trace, and his case had slipped through the cracks. But Shadow hadn't forgotten. He'd been part of the search team all those years ago when Noah vanished. Shadow had walked these very streets, his nose leading the way, unaware of how much the case would haunt him for years to come. Yet after weeks of searching, no evidence had been found, and the case was left cold. As Evelyn sifted through old notes, a wave of disbelief swept over her. Shadow had been reassigned after the case went unsolved. But it wasn't just a case of retirement. The dog had been forcibly retired, pushed aside with little fanfare, and reassigned to a quieter life. The department had closed the chapter, but Shadow's connection to the case never truly ended. Evelyn realized with growing certainty that Shadow had carried the weight of the unsolved mystery all along, and now, after all these years, Shadow was trying to solve it again, in his own silent way. Evelyn had known from the beginning that this was no ordinary dog. But this was something else entirely. Evelyn and Mason had uncovered the kind of evidence that could no longer be ignored. It wasn't just the old crayon drawings, the half-decayed blanket, or the name Noah stitched into the fabric. No, it was the fact that Shadow's alert had cracked the case wide open. Forensic units were called in, and the scene was examined with the precision only experts could bring. They dug into the wall where Shadow had focused for so long, and as the drywall was removed, the truth of what had been hidden for so long became impossible to deny. The cubby, sealed off and forgotten by time, had preserved memories of a child's existence, a child who had been stolen from the world far too soon. The crayon drawings, crude yet filled with innocence, told a haunting story of a child who had once played there, unaware of the horrors that were unfolding just outside his world. The small shoe, now crumbling with age, symbolized the last remnants of a life that was snuffed out before it even had a chance to flourish. And then there was the name, Noah. The name stitched into the blanket spoke volumes. This wasn't just a case of a missing child. It was a case of a child who had been forgotten, buried beneath years of silence. But thanks to Shadow's steadfast presence, they could now bring that silence to an end. Evelyn knew that the report they'd get from the authorities would be dry, clinical, and stripped of emotion. But to her, it read like the validation of everything they had discovered. It wasn't just a cold case anymore. The official report was brief, but its implications were seismic. Investigation reopened based on canine behavioral alert. No credible human testimony available. Evelyn read the line over and over, her fingers gripping the edges of the paper. The words were sterile, but they confirmed something far more profound. Shadow had solved the case. In all the years she'd been a detective, Evelyn had seen countless investigations come to an end. Some cases remained unsolved, lingering in the shadows of the past, while others had closure. But this was different. Shadow wasn't just a tool in the investigation. He was the key. No human could have pieced this together in the same way. No one else had seen the clues that had been right in front of them all along. As Evelyn glanced up from the report, she caught Mason's eye. She could tell what he was thinking. The disbelief, the awe, it was all there. But Evelyn's face remained calm. She didn't need to say anything aloud. She had already learned the truth. "They mean he solved it," Evelyn said softly, her voice steady, but laced with a hint of reverence. "They just don't know how to write that in a report." Mason let out a slow exhale, his eyes narrowing as he processed the enormity of what they were dealing with. Shadow had done it, in his own silent, unwavering way. The K9 had unraveled a case that had stumped human investigators for over a decade. But now, thanks to his persistence and instincts, Noah's story would be heard. As they sat together in the quiet office, a new sense of determination filled the air. The case was reopened. Justice, though long delayed, was finally within reach. And Shadow, the dog who had never forgotten, had just brought the truth to light. After years of mystery and quiet tension, Shadow finally finds peace. The once constant ritual of staring at the wall, his watchful eyes always searching for something unknown, is now over. Evelyn fully adopts Shadow, and the bond between them becomes unbreakable. No longer does he pace in circles or growl at the wall. He finally rests, lying peacefully by the fire, his golden eyes half closed in contentment. The constant weight he had carried for so long seems to have lifted, and his once tense posture has relaxed. Evelyn watches him closely, noticing how his breathing has slowed. The dog who had once been haunted by the past, the memories of his former life, his unsolved cases, and his troubled retirement, has found a home where he can finally heal. His body no longer tenses at every creak of the floor or every gust of wind. Instead, he's at peace, his mind calm for the first time in ages. On her table, Evelyn keeps one item from the hidden cubby, the crayon drawing of a boy and a dog, both simple in their design, yet profound in their meaning. The drawing shows the boy and the dog standing side by side, with the dog's golden paw clearly visible. It's as if it was always meant to be a symbol of the bond they shared, even before Evelyn and Shadow ever met. The image is a reminder of Noah, of the case that was solved not through human effort, but through the silent resolve of a dog who remembered. One evening, as Shadow rests by the fire, Evelyn gently runs her hand along the golden streak on his paw, the same mark that had led them to discover the truth about the missing boy. She has always known there was something unique about Shadow, something deeper than just being a former K9 officer. There's a history in his eyes, a story he couldn't quite tell. But now, with the case finally resolved, she feels as though she's discovered the last piece of the puzzle. Whatever your name was back then, you never gave up, did you? Evelyn whispers softly to him. She doesn't expect an answer. She doesn't need one. In that moment, she knows that the dog who had been left in the shadows of his past has finally found peace. He had been through so much, a lifetime of service, sacrifice, and unsolved mysteries. And yet, he never stopped searching for the truth. Even in the quiet moments when no one else believed, Shadow had carried that truth within him. And now he could finally rest. As she speaks, Shadow sighs in deep relief. His golden eyes flutter closed, and for the first time in years, there's a sense of true serenity in his expression. The weight of his past is no longer dragging him down. He had solved the case, protected those he loved, and found a family who would never let him go. And in that moment, Evelyn realizes that Shadow is not just a dog who had been adopted. He is a dog who had never truly been lost. He was just waiting for the right person, the right moment to bring him home. Shadow was home. As the story comes to a close, it's time to turn the spotlight on the viewers and make them think. Evelyn and Shadow's journey wasn't just about solving a case. It was about recognizing the power and intuition that animals can possess, an unseen bond with the past that humans often miss. Now, it's their turn to reflect on their own pets. Have you ever seen your pet act like they were sensing something invisible? What if they were remembering something you never knew happened? Would you ignore the signs, or tear down a wall, to uncover the truth? These questions challenge the audience to think about their own experiences with pets, and whether they too have ever witnessed something unexplainable. It invites them to share their own stories in the comments, creating an emotional connection with the content and encouraging them to engage more deeply with the video. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who still thinks dogs are just animals. Sometimes, the ones who can't speak are the ones who remember the loudest. Subscribe for more true K9 stories every week. The quiet heroes deserve to be heard. You don't want to miss the incredible stories we'll be sharing next. Stories that will make you rethink everything you know about the bond between humans and animals.